making sure that you are making sure that your setup, your technical setup, is actually working and functioning. This is one of those things that, again, it seems like such a basic thing, but I, as a recruiter, have seen so many job seekers, so many candidates that have been presented for positions fail to do and not do this effectively enough. So, folks, tip number one is, look, you got to make sure that your technical setup is functioning and everything is all set at your end from a technical standpoint. Mistake a lot of job seekers do is they set things up and they actually test out their camera, their mic, their video, their audio, and all that stuff a few minutes before the interview or during the video interview itself. So you got to make sure at your end, folks, that you are testing out your equipment and all those technical aspects at your end, and make sure that all of that stuff is all set up and working and functioning well before the interview, because you don't want to have to deal with these things during the interview or right before the interview and have it mess up your chances of having a proper conversation with the hiring team or the hiring manager. Right? So you need to make sure that you're testing all these things. So again, is your mic functioning? Is your camera functioning? Is the sound working? Is it able to pick up the sound? Like at your end, is your mic picking up the sound? And is your camera, like, can your system, can your computer, can your laptop even handle your camera? Look, there are some cameras out there. Some of you are buying HD cameras that your laptop or your computer can't even handle because the resolution is set to high. So you got to check out your settings as well. I've seen many people unable to have a normal, proper conversation because the video is lagging. The software can't handle, the system can't handle the camera or the mic or whatever the hardware is. So ensure this compatibility, folks, and you got to test it out. So well before the interview, set up a conversation with someone that you can test that out with as well, right? Maybe a friend, maybe a family member, maybe a colleague. Say, hey, look, I got an interview coming up, a video interview. Can you set aside a few minutes just so I can test this out and make sure that this is working on this platform? Make sure that stuff is right. Now, in regards to the software, I wanted to speak real quick about the software, and this is especially in relation to Zoom or what's the other one, WebEx, or any other video conferencing platforms you might be using. A lot of you might be making, feeling like, okay, you're going to use the browser-based or the web-based version. Now, I have seen issues with candidates who have used the browser or web-based version, whereby there's a lag in the communication or the lag in the video, or simply things disconnected. Now, I actually experienced this recently with one of my coaching clients, where we kept getting disconnected on the Zoom call, right? And we couldn't figure out what was happening until ultimately, doing some troubleshooting, I was able to figure out that they were using the browser-based version of Zoom to have our coaching sessions, right? So I had him download the client, the Zoom client, and everything was fine after that. So you got to make sure. So I would advise you to not use the browser-based version. See if you can download the actual client onto your system in order to have that, use that platform, whether it's Zoom or WebEx or Microsoft Teams or any other, platform that might be utilized for these video interviews that you're being scheduled for. So that would be my advice to that. Now, the second part of that is you got to make sure that the software is able to run on your system, right? Because if your system is fairly old, it can't handle the client that you downloaded, that might be an issue as well. So look, clearly, folks, you got to figure these things out well before the interview, right? You got to figure out, can I use the browser-based version? If I download the client, can my system handle it? Is my camera going to be able to handle? Is my system going to be able to handle the camera? Is my mic working properly? All these technical aspects, folks, you need to figure these things out well before the interview. It is not the interviewer's job to figure these things out or help you out or troubleshoot you with this stuff. Or don't expect them to be lenient about the fact that you're not well prepared at your end, because guess what? Not looking into these things well before the interview will show from their perspective, from their standpoint, they will consider it as if a lack of interest in your part, because you haven't put in the effort to check well before the conversation as to whether things are compatible on your side and your end of things. So make sure you are, looking into this technical setup stuff, right? Now, another tip I wanted to share in regards to the technical aspects is, as much as possible, I usually advise people avoid using your smartphone, unless it's a smartphone that has a great data connection, or that you're connected to a Wi-Fi that can actually handle the bandwidth required for a video conference or a video discussion, right? Especially because keep in mind it's two-way, right? Like you, all of you watching this, it's kind of a one-way, right? You're just streaming my video, but when it's two-way, there's more bandwidth required for that. So you got to make sure your smartphone is able to handle that, and make sure you have a strong internet connection. Because look, if there's going to be video lags and stuff like that, that's going to affect the communication. No matter how good you're selling yourself and pitching yourself and talking about your experience and all that stuff, when there's a video lag and there's those interruptions involved in the communication, that's going to affect your ability to sell yourself, and it's just going to ruin the conversation, right? So you got to make sure there's a smooth connection. If you're using your smartphone, just in case, I would suggest you make sure it's a full battery or it's plugged in, and make sure, again, internet connection is extremely important. So make sure that that stuff is all figured out. Now, all that being said, have a backup plan, folks. You got to have a backup plan, because just in case, you can check things like a few days in advance, but on the interview itself, Murphy's Law, right? If anything can go wrong, it will go wrong, and exactly when you don't want things to go wrong. So have a backup plan. Like, what is your backup plan? Do you have an additional laptop you can use? Is there an additional desktop or a PC or whatever it is that you use as a backup, right? As a backup for you to utilize in case whatever you are planning to use does not really is not functioning the way that you expected. So always have a backup plan. That's very important.